Hi everyone, we are on chapter 2. This time there won't be any slides. That's the great thing about a digital book is if we were in a classroom together, we could sit with a textbook and we could flip through it together. So now we're able to do that. So if you're not a fan of digital books, here is one positive to focus on. So we learned a lot of relevant information in chapter 1, and now we're building and expanding on that knowledge, and you'll start to see that that trend is consistent. So if you have a really good grasp on everything from chapter 1, then you are ready to move on to chapter 2. If you're feeling at all shaky on that, you need to solidify your level of confidence with chapter 1 before you proceed. That is my best advice for being successful. Once again, we always want to look at the learning objective, so hopefully you have begun by doing that. So what is a healthy diet? Well, first of all, it points out that a healthy diet should provide adequate calories and all of the essential nutrients to maintain nutritional status and provide for appropriate growth and development across the lifespan. Notice it says all of the essential nutrients. So you're going to come to understand soon that there are both essential and non-essential nutrients. So let's think about what the word essential means. If it's essential that you have a textbook, you must have a textbook. So essential nutrients are those you must get. In other words, you must get them from food. Non-essential means they're nutrients your body needs, but you don't have to get them from food. Well, if you don't get them from food, where do you get them from? No, not pills or bottles. Your body produces them. There are different nutrients your body can actually produce, and we'll touch on some of those later, but vitamin D is a great example. So keep that in the back of your mind. Key point right here in this first section. Maintaining nutritional status includes the avoidance of both nutritional deficiencies and excesses, which can contribute to poor health. Hopefully, I have already impressed that upon you. So, as I mentioned previously, deficiencies, with the exception of disease states in a developed country like ours, are pretty much of very little concern anymore. It's the excesses. And that is why the Nutrition Facts panel is designed to focus on helping you determine low, moderate, significant, or high amounts of nutrients which are potentially harmful when consumed in excess. If you recall from what you learned, the only nutrient on the Nutrition Facts panel that we want to focus on getting a lot of is fiber. And that's because we know from research in this country, ongoing studies that help us determine what people are and aren't eating, we know that most Americans aren't getting enough fiber. And as you will soon come to appreciate, fiber is critical not just to the optimal functioning of the body in the moment, but the prevention of disease. So we want people to be searching out foods higher in fiber, but everything else on that Nutrition Facts panel was essentially focused on what to limit, because they're the things that people in this country are consuming too much of. So I hope you feel comfortable with what you've learned previously. It goes on to detail some of the reasons that we are concerned, and I'm going to let you read all of that on your own. But what I'm going to point out at the bottom here is that one of the first questions many people ask about nutrition is, what is a healthy diet? And while you hear a whole lot of things all the time, it comes back to the basics: balance, moderation. So it tells you here a balanced diet contains a sufficient quantity of each type of food. It's not extremist. It doesn't eliminate entire food groups or label foods as bad. It includes variety, which is what creates balance. This is what allows us to get all of the essential nutrients that we need. If we eliminate entire food groups or categories of food, we risk potentially not getting certain nutrients. This is why avoidance of foods in any circumstances, whether it's for weight loss or due to suspected allergies or because somebody has a certain disease, this is why it can be a bad thing. So it's all about creating balance. I, as a registered dietitian, unless I know that somebody has a life-threatening allergy to a particular food, otherwise I'm not going to be telling them don't ever eat this or that, no matter what their situation. It's always, how much they should or can eat. Moderation refers to the practice of regularly eating foods high in nutrient content while limiting the frequency and portion of foods with little nutrient value. In other words, there is room to have fun, right? I verbally always say the 90-10 perspective, and it's not exact, but if 90% of what you consume is in the interest of your health, and ideally, the more you do that, the more you learn to love those foods because they make you feel good and you love the way that it makes you feel, then 10% of what you eat can just be all about blowing it out and having some fun because it will be offset. And there has to be room for that. I'm going to click through, or rather, before I do that, the very bottom here. A food is nutrient dense if it contains a significant amount of nutrients for the least amount of calories. So hopefully you recall when I mentioned nutrient dense before. You may have heard the phrase, the most bang for your buck. So when you're making a purchase, you're always looking for the best deal. If the same item is being sold at multiple locations, you're going to look for the lowest priced option or source because you want to get the most bang for your buck. Well, I like to think of it the same way I say the most bang for your bite. You want to maximize the amount of valuable nutrients in every bite. That's what nutrient density is all about. All right, clicking through. The 10 leading causes of death in the United States in 2015. Now, remember, nothing's ever going to be up to date because it takes a long time to put data together. It doesn't happen in the moment. So you're always going to see that dates are a handful of years behind. From a scientific perspective, it's generally accepted that any data or research within a 5 to 10 year time frame is considered current, right? And this really hasn't changed much. So as you look at these, the most common or leading cause of death in the United States is heart disease. Now, I do want to throw this in here because I'm going to say it again later. In many lists, you won't see the word heart disease. You'll see the phrase cardiovascular disease, and that's probably a more accurate statement. Cardio is heart, vascular is vessels. There are vessels in your heart, however, those vessels continue throughout the entirety of your being. So when we refer to cardiovascular disease, we are referring to disease within the heart and all interconnected vessels throughout the body. Because remember, these are body systems. Your heart is not in isolation. The vessels that leave from it traverse every inch of your anatomy. So whatever is traveling through the vessels in your heart is traveling through the vessels in the rest of your body. That means it's passing through every organ and limb, which means anything that harms one part harms all other parts. If you look at number 5, it's a stroke. Well, a stroke and a heart attack are the same event. They're just occurring in 2 different parts of the body because the same things that cause one cause the other, right? So it's not surprising that heart disease and stroke, which occurs in the brain vessels, are leading causes of death. Now, there are plenty of other diseases that are being caused within the vessels by the same things. They just don't necessarily all make the top 10, right? Cancer is the second one, and there are many types of cancer, more than you can even imagine. And the cause of different cancers is varied. But what we do know all these things have in common, with the exception of perhaps number 10, is that they are all very much lifestyle related. I suppose that number 10 can be debated in that respect. But when I say lifestyle related, I mean how we choose to live our life in terms of physical activity, stress management, sleep, and what we eat. Yes, Alzheimer's disease is. Accidents, I suppose you could say that's debatable, but then again, some accidents are actually the result of health problems. So maybe somebody's blood sugar dropped because they weren't managing their diabetes well. Their diabetes having been caused by their lifestyle. If their blood sugar dropped and they fell and cracked their head open, then that was an accident, but it oftentimes is related to an illness. And I speak to that from a direct experience role because I was an emergency medical technician off and on over the years running rescue, and so I've seen this firsthand. You would actually be surprised how many car accidents you witness where you might assume that somebody was drinking and driving were actually from medical crises, right? So that accident was from a stroke or an aneurysm or a low blood glucose in someone with diabetes and so on. So I'm going to ask that you read through all of this. We will come to more clearly elucidate the pathophysiology, meaning the processes by which diseases develop over time in conjunction with lifestyle. You are really at the introductory point. Then it gets into the dietary reference intakes, the DRI, which you are now familiar with. The DRI, remember, are the collective nutrient recommendations. Think of it as an umbrella, and from that umbrella, there are different strands hanging down. So the RDA is the recommended daily allowance. That's basically saying, here's what we know people should get. They need to get at least this much. Sometimes we're not entirely sure how much you have to have, but we have a fairly good idea on what's adequate, what should be enough, so we call that the adequate intake. And then, as you already well know, we oftentimes have a good handle on how much is too much, and we call that the tolerable upper limit. So as you read through here, those things are being referenced. We have other ways of estimating needs, estimated average requirements. I wouldn't sweat that one too much. You can skip over that, but you'll see the two that I mentioned and the third one right here at the top. Down here, acceptable macronutrient distribution range. I'm going to ask that you write that down and get your head around it, because sometimes people get confused later because they didn't fully grasp this. So let me walk you through it. Acceptable. You know what that word means, right? What is enough? What is appropriate? Macronutrient. Ask yourself, which three nutrients are the macronutrients? Carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And a distribution range implies that there's a low end and a high end. So what is the appropriate amount, the low end and the high end, of carbohydrate in a day, of fat in a day, of protein in a day? There's a range, and we all fall somewhere within the range for each of those three respective macronutrients. Does that make sense? We'll come back to that again later, so if you have questions, let me know. The EER, the estimated energy requirement, just kind of averages daily needs. I mentioned to you before that estimating calorie needs is just that, a matter of estimation. So some people wonder why it is on the nutrition facts panel that you will see it say something to the effect of based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Sometimes there is a second column that says based on a 2,500 calorie diet. Well, some people say use the 2,000 for women and the 2,500 for men because men need more than women. That's reasonable. But again, none of those are exact science, right? So no, we don't all need the exact number of calories. However, if I were to calculate the calorie needs for each of you in this course and then average those needs, it would come out to somewhere around 2,000 calories a day for women and an average of 2,500 a day for men. Some people need more and less, so that's how it averages out. Since the nutrient recommendations on the nutrition facts panel are not an exact science, there's really no need to worry about the nuances. If one person needs more like 1,500 calories a day and another needs around 2,000, a difference in several grams or milligrams per person isn't going to be enough difference to worry about, since we don't actually know the amount of any nutrients contained within our foods with that degree of accuracy anyway. Are you following the logic? If that was a bit of a overwhelming phrase there, go ahead and click and drag back and listen to it again. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, and it talks to you about using the DRI, which I've already talked to you quite a bit about, and you have this fabulous imagery here, which I encourage you to make sure you feel comfortable with. So we click through, and it says here on the left-hand side, to the left of the red print, finally, it is crucial to recognize that DRI values are intended as general guidelines for a population group rather than an individual. Their purpose is to suggest general nutrient intake rather than to serve as a specific guideline for individual dietary planning. Hopefully that reiterates what I've just stated. Again, you need to skim through regardless of whether or not I'm touching on these things. The visuals are fabulous. I think they draw your attention to so many of the points that I'm attempting to emphasize. So whatever you do, continually look at the visuals because it really will help clarify many things for you. You will begin to see quite a pattern. For example, all of this here in this pink box was emphasized in Chapter 1, including on your assignment, and you can see that it's stated right here as well. Why am I drawing your attention to that? Because this is going to be something that we return to time and time again. We want to limit added sugars in all forms. There is no better form of added sugar. Sugar is sugar. You don't need to sweat details like, hey, does high fructose corn syrup do more harm than others? That's now considered old school concern, right? We're focused on the big picture. Anybody who's worried about which added sugar is better is really not that worried about their health, because people who are worried about their health are focused on limiting their intake of added sugars, in which case, with the small amount they consume, which one it was really becomes a moot point. We can't micromanage our diets, guys. There are too many factors. We have to focus on the big picture, and things tend to fall into place. When people focus on micromanaging, they often, as the phrase goes, lose sight of the forest for the trees. So you then get into diet-based nutrient recommendations, which incorporate established specific nutrient recommendations with the existing scientific evidence based on research. So the United States and many other countries publish dietary guidelines as part of their government health promotion efforts. We have, obviously, the dietary guidelines for Americans, which are updated every 5 years. As you read through here, hopefully your takeaway is what this is about and why we have it. So we are doing ongoing research in this country. There are people all throughout the country who are participating ongoing in the completion of regular surveys about what they are and aren't eating, so that we can collect data from all different walks of life and all different demographics and collate it together and average it out to see where the strengths and weaknesses lie within our societal dietary intake. And we see patterns consistently, and we see things like too much added sugar and too much sodium and too much saturated fat and not enough fiber. And as a result, we know on a governmental level, in terms of helping with health management through things like food labels, what to target. We know on an educational level, in terms of things like writing textbooks and forming curriculums, what to emphasize. We know on a research level where the correlations are between the habits that people are engaged in and the incidence of otherwise preventable diseases. And so we are seeking to inform and educate people. If you focus on certain guidelines in terms of lifestyle, such as diet, then you will increase the chance of being healthy and decrease the chance of suffering from otherwise preventable illnesses. So out of that top 10 list, most of those things are also considered largely preventable diseases. And as you begin to learn more about nutrition from an anatomical and physiological and biochemical perspective, you begin to understand why our behaviors are so strongly associated with some of these conditions and why different behaviors would lessen the likelihood of these conditions ever coming into fruition in so many people. So it's summed up at the bottom here. Again, I encourage you to look at this, and let me reiterate to you what I've mentioned in the first lecture, and that is that just because there are references to animal foods, meaning dairy and meat, it doesn't mean that everyone's obligated to consume those. Nowadays, it has become much more common to know people who are vegetarians, and there are all different kinds of vegetarians, including vegans, and some people still are misinformed and think there's something wrong with that. I personally am an omnivore. I consume everything, so I have no personal bias in the recommendations that I emphasize or teach you about. I think that's an asset because I do eat everything, but I eat everything in moderation, and I am largely plant-focused because that is what the scientific research indicates. Mostly plants, far fewer animals in our diets is consistently indicated to be in the best interest of our long-term health and disease prevention. So just because it references something like a healthy eating pattern, including milk, yogurt, and cheese, doesn't mean that one must have that. When one understands nutrition science, they begin to understand that there are foods that contain the same nutrients that are plant-based, and as long as they're consuming adequate amounts of those foods, they can achieve the same nutrient intake. That's yet another role of a registered dietitian, to possess that expert knowledge to help somebody figure such things out. So, clicking right through, you already know about my plate. I pointed out to you kind of most of the benefits. I shared with you some of the controversy. Nothing's perfect, especially when you're trying to make something really complicated into a very simplistic and easily conveyed message. So it's important that you read these criticisms, because one of the key skills that you want to hone in college, especially in a bachelor's degree program, is that of critical thinking, which means looking at the big picture, knowing both sides, realizing everything's not black or white. There are no good or bad foods. There's the whole big picture. It's about the whole pattern of eating. By the same token, any of these emblems that you see, like my plate, have pros and cons. And in order to be educated, you need to be able to evaluate both sides. There are always going to be people who have questions. There are always going to be people who dispute things. And the more knowledgeable you are, the better able you can answer questions or defend your argument. So I'll encourage you to read that on your own. I'm waiting for your page. Let's see. Most of this is somewhat repetitive. I wouldn't sweat that imagery too terribly much. This is just a sample. I wouldn't spend much time on this page. Some images are more important than others. This is an excellent image. I would take the time to explore this. Hopefully it meshes well with what I've already shared. It reiterates what I told you about the word protein. Remember, vegetables are a food, fruits a food, grains are a food. Those are actually food groups. Proteins are a nutrient, and it's emphasizing that we need to choose some foods which are very dense with protein to make sure we get enough, and those can be either of animal or plant origin. Fruits and veggies matter more. More Matters program has been used to emphasize that it is a weakness in the American diet. We need to focus on more plants. That is definitely not the standard American diet. Notice that the acronym Standard American Diet, SAD, spells the word sad. If you don't know what the standard American diet is, it's very sad. It is all about what you would probably call junk food. It is all about non-nutrient dense food. It is heavy in animals and weak in plants. Therefore, it is not well balanced. So we want to try to help people overcome that dilemma. Why? Because we want to help them not just feel good now, but prevent otherwise preventable diseases. So as you can see on the right, multiple national health organizations have published dietary guidelines targeting risk reduction for specific diseases, and I'm going to ask that you read through that independently. Reading the next page. Cultural considerations, as I pointed out at the very beginning, are something that you should take a moment to skim, because these are little seeds you're planting in your mind. And as you embark on your healthcare pursuits professionally, you will encounter a diverse range of people, and some of these little pearls will hopefully come back to you, or will at least help you know how to investigate individual differences more clearly. As you look here in the middle, it continues the content from the other page. It references the American Society Cancer. Cancer is certainly something that weighs heavily on many people's minds, so you want to pay close attention to anything in this text that's addressing cancer. Little patient education checklist. I think that's worth a quick little glance over. And then you also see cardioprotective dietary guidelines. Think about that. Cardio is heart, protective, things that help protect the heart. In other words, disease prevention guidelines from the American Heart Association. Again, really, nothing is just about the heart. That is just one part of the cardiovascular system, and when the heart is affected, other parts of the cardiovascular system are affected, thus other organs and tissues are affected. This is why we rarely see one problem in isolation. You are going to find as you enter healthcare that nobody comes in with a health problem. There's usually a whole combination. Sometimes we use phrases that sound somewhat negative, like a train wreck, because somebody has so many multiple and overlapping conditions. By and large, anybody with a health condition related to lifestyle has multiple. So anyone with diabetes will have cardiovascular disease, for example. And someone who has high blood pressure, well, where's that pressure high? Within the blood vessels. Where are those blood vessels? Throughout the whole body, throughout the entire cardiovascular system. So someone with high blood pressure is a person who has cardiovascular disease, because that high blood pressure that's occurring throughout the cardiovascular system is damaging all parts of that system, and that is going to ultimately result in more obvious forms of cardiovascular disease like strokes and heart attacks or kidney failure. So we looked at food labels in terms of the nutrition facts panel. This is really important stuff for you to read on these pages, so please do read it. One thing that it's emphasizing is that the ingredients list is stated in order of predominance by weight. In other words, most ingredients to least ingredients. And you are going to hear throughout this course about the importance of whole grains, meaning the whole grain is still there. Every one of its pieces and parts that has so much health value. So the moment we refine a grain, refine means removal, we have less than the whole. We are lacking in valuable nutrients. Refined grain consumption is very high in this country. Whole grain consumption is very low. There are disease correlations. So how does one know when they look at the vast array of grain-based products like pastas and breads and such, which one to choose, or cereals for that matter? Well, the healthiest one is where the very first ingredient is whole grain. So the very first word in the ingredient list is the word whole. Most of what's in there, if not all of it, is a whole grain. So what does it mean when we see the word enriched? Well, if a grain has been refined, some components have been removed in processing, then the law says that some nutrients, a select few, must be added back to compensate for some of those losses. We are making this refined or less than healthful substance a little bit richer. It's not back to its original whole grain state though. So the word enriched tells you what you're looking at is a refined grain and refined grain is not the healthy choice. So we can look and see that this product is made primarily of enriched flour, and simply the word enriched is a red flag. The fact that it's the first ingredient is very telling, and even if you didn't know it was cookies, which I think is a given, hopefully, as far as not being very healthy, you would know it's a poor choice. But let's take something like pasta. And you're standing before the wall of pasta in the store. The majority of the boxes are going to be enriched grain. You want to find the one that says whole. So here's a little activity for you. The next time you're in the grocery store, I want you to look at the prices first. I want you to find the least expensive prices, which is generally the store brand. Now down in the Keys, sometimes it's a little more challenging to find as much variety as it is in other places, but I shop in the Keys and I manage to get what I need, so I know it's there. So I want you to look for the lower price store brand, and I want you to search out a package where when you look at the pasta ingredients list, it says whole durum, D-U-R-U-M wheat. That's it. Just that. That is the healthy choice. And that is my first example for you in this course as to how it is a myth that healthy eating is expensive. Healthy eating only seems expensive because people are not well educated about what healthy eating means. If you also look in that wall of pasta and you find the beautiful, bright, showy packages that say all kinds of things like high in fiber and this and that, and you look at the ingredient list, you're going to see lots of other things. You might see something like chicory root or inulin, which are processed fiber powders that have been added to make it appear more healthful. But you're not going to see just whole grain. So you're paying more for something less. You are not getting the most bang for your bite or your buck. So less expensive oftentimes equals healthier. You're going to start to see this pattern over and over again. Alright, all of that is for you to read on your own, as well as this, and it reiterates the changes that I spoke of in the previous lecture. You will oftentimes see this label on the left still, because as I said, the law is not required that these changes be made. So we're not seeing this label on the right all the time. So it is necessary, I have no idea what's going on here. It is necessary that you know one more thing. If you see the label on the left, the one that is still allowed, notice what I talked about before. Total carbohydrate, we don't look at, only for people with diabetes, which you'll learn about later. Sugars are listed under that, meaning total sugars. I already explained to you that line is useless. Notice there is no percent. If there is no percent, there is no recommendation for how much you should consume. So whether it's 1 gram or 100, you don't have any way to evaluate that. So the only way that people have been able to evaluate their choices up until these newer labels have begun to be implemented is to go to the ingredients list and look for names that mean added sugar. And as a rule, if there is any one added sugar within the ingredients list, then that's not great. If it's within the first 3 ingredients, you know that the item is largely made of sugar, and therefore it's not a wise choice. So look right up here and you'll see some of the names of added sugar that I've already mentioned. Honey, table sugar, syrups, be it maple syrup, agave syrup, it doesn't matter. There are many other terms that mean added sugar. Lactose, maltose, fructose, sucrose, I always say the OS words. And the list goes on. So look at some of the packages in your house, and if you have anything that doesn't have the added sugars line on it, you're going to have to look at the ingredients list and start to get a handle. The goal is to have minimal intake of added sugars in a day. Desserts are a given. So the moment you eat a dessert or a treat, you know you've met your max and probably exceeded it, which is why all of your other general food choices shouldn't be having any added sugar throughout the day. Here's an example. Go and look at the peanut butter in the store. You want to find the ingredients list that says peanuts. What is peanut butter? Smushed peanuts. You get some peanuts, you smush them, you have peanut butter, right? There's no actual butter in it. It's just a term that refers to the consistency. Almond butter, smushed almonds. Cashew butter, smushed cashews that are spreadable. Most of the containers will have added fats, different types of oils, as well as added sugars. And those are in the ingredients list. That's not the ones we want. We want almonds. We want peanuts. We want cashews. If it says, salt, what are you looking for in the sodium line? 5% or less, because sodium is salt is partially made of sodium. If it's low in sodium and it's just nuts, go for it. Usually these are the ones where the oil separates out of the top. But if you see palm oil or other oils in the list and you see any form of honey or sugar in any way, that is not the healthy choice. That's more like candy or dessert. And these are the little tidbits that sneak up on us throughout the day and allow us to quickly exceed the recommended intakes in a very subtle and insidious way that tricks us into not understanding how it is that we don't have a healthy diet and it's taking a toll on us. So this knowledge is essential for good health. And if you are really absorbing this and applying this in your own life, then you will become very skilled at using this knowledge and conveying it to others. And that's how we create a chain reaction of useful knowledge that people can implement in their daily lives. All right, I'm going to click through. Good little tidbit right here about the interactions between nutrients and drugs. And then it starts to talk about the claims and the legalities of things. So I need you to read through this so that you can answer the questions on your assignments. Let me tell you just a little something. You know, every company that produces everything is in business for one reason: to sell things, to make money. Nobody's in it as a charitable endeavor. So which products are going to be likely to sell in today's health-conscious environment? Those with health claims that lead us to believe they're healthful. But most of us aren't really well educated in what healthy means or what good nutrition really means for all the previously addressed reasons, right? So we tend to look at the front of packages and see all kinds of fantastical claims, and they make an impression on us, and we choose those things. You hopefully now understand that looking at label claims on packages is a bad idea, because it isn't a reliable means of ensuring a good choice. Knowledge of how to use that nutrition facts panel, 5, 10, 15, 20%. Understanding to look for the word whole first. And if there's no added sugars line, making sure that the ingredients list doesn't have added sugars. Those are the key factors in making an educated decision. And I used to take people to grocery stores when I owned my own private practice. People would pay well for me to come to their homes or take them to grocery stores. And I spent at least 3 hours with somebody at any given time in their home and or a store. And as we would begin to peruse the aisles after I'd taught them some of these same things, they would say, "My goodness, it's going to take 3 hours for me to go grocery shopping." By the time we got to the middle aisles, they would start to say, "Hold on, don't help me, I got this. I know without even turning that around that that's a bad idea." By the time we got to the last aisle, they would say, "You know what? There's really not that many things in this entire store that turn out to be good choices. And now that I know which ones are, I'm just going to keep buying those over and over again, and I'll be in and out of here in no time." And I would just look at them and say, "Exactly. You buy the same staple items, and then you employ a little bit of creativity, and you turn them into all sorts of different fabulous meals that you can enjoy." So as you read through here, keep that in mind, and the fact that health claims are full of little intricacies and nuances that allow us to be very easily manipulated partially because they're so loosely termed and partially because of our own ignorance. There are lots of tricks going on here, so read very carefully. This also applies to supplements. The good old Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHEA, as we like to say, as the acronym would be pronounced, sounds very friendly. Well, what it is legislation that was influenced by lobbyists for supplement manufacturing companies, because dietary supplements are a billion-dollar industry, and in this country, we all have the right to protect our interests. So companies for all sorts of industries hire lobbyists to stand before Congress and convince them to pass laws that protect their interests. So the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act says that there is an honor system in place, and we are asking that supplement manufacturers put things into packages that are in fact what they claim to be, and do in fact do what they claim to do, but they aren't required to prove that the things do what they claim to do, nor that what's in the package is what the package claims is in there. The law says that anything can be put out into the marketplace and sold, and only if people start to have negative experiences, have harm to their health, and go to a physician and report it to them, and the physician in turn reports it to the government, only then are we at a government level allowed to investigate. And if we find that, yes, in fact, that did harm people, then the manufacturer is no longer allowed to sell it. That's probably exactly the opposite of what most people assume, and that is a perfect example of why you are here to be more educated than the average person, so that you can help them understand the realities and they can protect their own interests instead of those of industry. So we'll talk more about supplements at a later date. Nutritional information is what this falls under, and as I said to you at the very beginning of the course, nutritional misinformation is ubiquitous in society, meaning it is everywhere. So please read this section with a fine-tooth comb, and you will find questions on the assignment geared towards that. This is another section, hot topic, worth examining closely. We're back to the nursing care plan. You're now familiar with this general assessment. As I told you at the beginning, scrolling through and quickly quizzing yourself with these sorts of detailed little opportunities is wise. And once again, the chapter summary is like a mini quiz for your brain. Did you get this information? Did these key points sink in? If not, now you know to take a moment and revisit the things that did not. And again, there's some perfect examples of your quiz questions. And as always, you are welcome to post questions in the general discussion board area for questions, because it's like you're raising your hand in class and you want everyone to hear your questions so that they can witness our communication and benefit from it as well. Thank you very much.